competition keeps prices down far more effectively.
As long as suffering of sentient being remain, I will remain in order to serve.
I imagined God like my grandfather.
In conversation tonight, my guest is a theatre activist who has spent a lifetime building bridges between the urban and the rural, between the modern and the traditional, between the folk and the pseudo-folk. He has sculpted a brand of theatre uniquely his own. I'm delighted to welcome Habib Tanvir. Habib Sahib, you've recently done a play in the United States about building bridges.
Yes.
What was this play about?
Well, it turned out to be a play about the immigrant. I was asked to do workshops and at the end maybe produce a play, any at all, from Shano Casey to Gorky to Bernard Shaw or Shakespeare, anything, or just workshop. But when I was delivering lectures all over the states in many places, in a circular tour for a month, talking to Indian community and talking to taxi drivers, students, doctors, engineers, university lecturers, ordinary man in demand, in business, or people just looking for some opportunity. Every time I came across people who were stuck, and they said, we are stuck. We came for a degree, we obtained it, we happen to have got married here, or even if we brought our wives from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, we had children who were going to school, and then it's 17 years or 27 years and we are here, and they keep occasionally when they got an opportunity to go back, but could not overcome their nostalgia. So that became my play. Nostalgia and the immigrant, and the conversation with in the workshops I would ask them to enact their dreams or tell stories, and some very fantastic dreams came. So the subtitle of the play is Dreaming the Reality, and the whole play is full of dreams. It begins in wakeful life, ends in a scene when they wake up, but in between the whole play is one dream out there, a continuous dream.
What prompted you to sort of work in English? This is your first play perhaps in English.
I was doing it with for American actors in the Chicago Actors Ensemble. They were African Americans. I wanted to have the Indian Americans, the Native Americans, the Red Indians. Two of them did come, but they had some other assignments, so it was a pity. Some Indians in music and also in dance, and mostly white Americans of Polish origin, German origin, or Irish origin. All of these also had nostalgia.
Did you sort of experiment or innovate with form?
Yes, I did. I was writing in English for the first time of necessity, and also writing songs in English, and therefore had to have an American composer, actually two, but mainly Cameron, and he, because it was an Indian writing it, so in the back of my mind, no matter what the language, there were really things which came handiest to me, and that was my Indian experience. So I wanted to have some, for inspiration, some Indian music too.
Did you go back to the proscenium?
No, it was in the round. We did it with the audience on three sides. It was not totally in the round, because totally in the round dismays me. But it was a kind of circular condition in which one side was for the backdrop and the audience was slightly on higher takhats and chairs placed on them, and space left in the middle.
You have traditionally sort of been uncomfortable with the proscenium. Why is that? Is it because it embodies a tradition?
Not, I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable, but it is constricting. I had gone through the proscenium thing for a long time, and later on, when I was working in the village condition in Chhattisgarh, and getting my actors from there. So from village to village I would go around watching, and what I would see is all kinds of space. No space at all, just ground, and people sitting all around the same level. Sometimes barely 8 square feet of slightly raised platform, sometimes something huge. Invariably 3 sides covered by audience, but quite occasionally all round, and actors entering through the audience. This delighted me. In the beginning I used to fret and fume about audience members, some of those who consider themselves privileged, like the village mukhia, sarpanch, or some other such people. They would come, or friends of the actors, would just come and plonk themselves on the stage, cramping the space. And I used to be out of my depths, but my actors didn't seem to mind it. And quite soon I forgot all about that myself, because it appeared to be absolutely all right. They were all at home.
We'll come back to Chhattisgarh, for which you're perhaps the best known in your work with them. How did theatre first happen to you? How did it enter your life?
I was interested in theatre right from the beginning, in a sense, because at school, when I was barely 12, I think, I acted in a play written by my Persian teacher called Gauhare Aflas, Urf Polishwala. So this was, and the director was my drill master, and he drilled me into it, and he really taught me movement, which I would hate to teach anybody else now. But he would say, when you walk, you must put your foot with your heel going up, just like a pahalwan. So I would walk like that and start with the mudra this way. But I got a cup for it, so I have nothing to complain. And there was a scene we did from King John, in which I was Prince Arthur, and a colleague of mine, another student, played Hubert. And that was the scene when Hubert comes to take the prince for taking out his eyes. And the prince pleads that if you had a speck in your eye, Hubert, etc. So that little scene of 15 minutes or so, for that we only ordered also. We were very, very encouraged, and we felt very inspired and happy. And then in the college in Nagpur I would do some activities. But I was really going in initially for ICS. Then I gave up the idea, and I thought and that was because my father thought I should go in for it. My headmaster thought so. And just because I was topping and I was first division first, etc.
At that time, what promise did theatre hold out for you?
I had no notion of the theatre at that time. I was really, after the ICS, I was thinking I would go in for education line, teach. And then finally I thought I'll go in for the films. When I went for my MA to Aligarh, which I left halfway after 1 year, then I had got myself photographed and sent them to Bombay, aspiring to become a film actor.
Has that ever been a source of regret?
No, but I got into it in a very devious kind of manner, because I came from a lower middle class family. I didn't have the means to go to Bombay, and it intimidated me too, because it was a big city and I had never been out a lot. I applied for the Navy, hoping to be able to pass through all the other examinations and interviews, and until Lonavala. I said, if I pass, I'll go to the Navy. I was attracted. I was very fond of travel, so I thought this is adventure and this will mean a lot of travel. Lonavala got me stuck. In other written things, IQ and all was all right, but when they asked me to cross a bridge within 10 minutes with my team of 10 or 12 soldiers, and we were perched on a wall, and we had to go to the opposite wall. In between there was nothing, and they had given me everything, rope and all the other means. I kept on thinking for those 10 minutes I couldn't cross it. The advantage was that in those days we had 4 classes in railway trains: first class, second class, intermediate class, and third class. So I got an intermediate class pass lasting for a month to go to Lonavala and back. So that 1 month, and it was luxurious. Intermediate class was better than the first class today. It was wonderful. And Bombay was on the way, so I took that month, and within a matter of 2 days I was taken up in the films. I had gone to see the picture of Dorian Gray at Metro. I was discussing this during the interval with some friends, acquaintances whom I had met then. I had read the book, and somebody was watching from across the other table, and he came up and said, "You seem to be interested in cinema." And I said, "Yes, of course, I've come for it." He was a director. His name was Surya, and he was making a film called Aapke Liye, and was looking for the likely protagonist. So I was signed up at once.
What sent you back to the theatre?
I was then simultaneously, I was in the films now and again, writing for newspapers as a journalist, then picked up by Bukhari for the radio, and by that time I was already I was writing poetry, so I was attracted to PWA, which is Progressive Writers Association. Under Sajjad Zahir, in his house every week on Sunday we'll meet and read our stories, Krishna Chandra and Bedi and Ismat, and poetry, Majru, myself, Jafri. I was getting printed in Naya. That was a big impetus in Philip, and there was the IPTA. And being interested in films and acting and not always being busy in the cinema, I got into the IPTA because of my social political affiliations also by that time, which had become quite pronounced.
What were these affiliations?
I was on the left side. I was not a member of any party any time, but I was closer to the Communist Party of India at that time.
The early 70s, you were sort of a more active political activist, if I could put it that way, and you campaigned for Mrs. Gandhi in the 1971 elections. You were a nominated member of the Rajya Sabha. Did you ever sort of later, with the events that followed, did you ever regret that?
No, I don't, because it's all part of my development, you see, and I do not regret my IPTA days when we were very militant and used to write street plays also, and Premchand and other things dramatized by me. 1971, some people accuse me of supporting Indira Gandhi. 1971 is forgotten. Politically, and they should realize that if I was a leftist, I could only support Mrs. Indira Gandhi and no one else. The Communist Party of India was supporting Mrs. Gandhi, and there was this Sangathan of the other parties, and Chandni Chowk, Subhadra Joshi was standing, and there was no CPI member, and I had taken a truck and I was doing a play, and it was very much up my street. I had done street plays before, and I thought it was time to participate. Of course, I didn't do it next because soon afterwards, political scenario changed. Things happened which today, for example, I would find it very difficult even to vote because I do not know whether in my constituency there will be an appropriate candidate from the kind of party which I would like to vote for. That clarity is lacking. But 71, things were much clearer. I have no regrets about that.
You've been sort of a theatre activist, and theatre, in a sense, today embodies your life and your aspirations. What have you sought from theatre for yourself? What is it that motivates and drives you to work in the theatre? What does it give you?
You see, some people give it the fancy name of dedication. I don't find it in me to be able to grasp the meaning of this word. It is applicable only to the extent to which people who remain stuck to something get a kick out of it. It is, if it pleases you, if it satisfies you, it gives you a kick, you enjoy it. I think that's all there is to the word dedication. So I enjoy it tremendously, quite simply, and that is why I have not even gone back to the cinema in a big way. I mean, I occasionally do act and have done it in the serials too, television serials, but the medium of television also doesn't by itself attract me. I do not deny the power of it and things, but not like theatre.
What is it about theatre that attracts you and gives you joy and pleasure?
You see, the thing initially in Bombay which made me leave Bombay and the cinema, I left Bombay not when I had done with the films, but I was already acting in better films, getting better roles by better directors. At that time I realized that I had something to say, and that I could do only in theatre. Something to say even in terms of acting, sheer acting. I was hardly a director at that time. I could write, I was trying to write poetry and plays, but direction I never dreamt of, except that it was forced on me. Everybody went to jail, Balda Sani, Deena Gandhi, the whole lot of them. And I was left and was deflated. Why I was left? Because in my presumption I had thought I had gone underground. They remained in jail for 2 years, which was a big respite for me, because for 2 years I got total autonomy and freedom to do what I liked. So I had to direct, write, act, everything. Then I became interested in direction. But in the cinema in those days, my feeling was, unlike these days, that the producer had the final say. By the producer, I mean the man, the money bag, the man who had the money, who invested his money into it, not even the director. The director was told the formula, even the actor was told how to act, so that that recipe which produced the box office hit should be kept intact. That disgusted me, and I thought, theatre, I can do what I like, I can have my say, not only in terms of writing, but getting the actor to critically present a character, because a character can be produced in so many ways.
Obviously, your theatre and your work speaks for itself, but is there a conscious process that you could articulate about what it is that you're really seeking to say through your work?
Because of my social, political commitments, I thought reality reflected in theatre must be critically reflected. And that critical reflection, in my maturer years, of course, is neither preachy nor loaded with message, but you will see a slant in which, if I may say so, it might stimulate you to find the answer. If we can produce the kind of questions normally not asked about things mostly taken for granted, if that question is sharply posed, stimulating the darshak to think for himself the answer, I think the theatre has that, about that particular theme, justice has been done. Anyone who presents an answer on a platter, except in the situation of a street play, agit prop play, where a quick answer is needed for a quick problem, for an instant problem of some strike because of some minimum wages, and minimum wages problem solved, you can throw the play into the scrap heap. It has served its purpose. That may need an answer. Any other play written in depth and produced with any kind of layers, nuances, undertones, must profoundly disturb the audience. It should not go back and sleep over it, but the images should haunt him a bit and pose the question. So they strive after that sort of kind of play. I do.
You have worked and experimented greatly with theatre at so many levels, and much of that is embodied in your work with the Chhattisgarh, the actors and the troupe from that area. What drew you to that, and what have you been seeking to develop and evolve in the form of theatre that is in some senses distinctly your own?
You see, nearly 7, 8 years in the IPTA Bombay had given me a certain sort of perspective and a certain experience. Then I got acquainted with Bertolt Brecht, which inspired me no end because I loved it. And it is at that stage, having left Bombay, that I came across the Sanskrit drama, which fascinated me, some of the masterpieces. Having got these, I went to England for my training, further training in theatre in the RADA, and traveled all over Europe observing theatres, and then observing Brecht's theatre. And my reading of Brecht's intentions and output was that despite much that has been made of his international influences that he received, and also from medieval European theatre, commedia dell'arte, etc., but from China, from Tibet, from Burma, from India, and from American jazz and African blues, all this is much talked of. But I noticed, watching all his major productions and staying for 8 months in Berlin, in and out, altogether 8, which is a long time from out of 3 years, that he remained German to the core. His music is Eisler and Kurt Weill are innovative, and so was Brecht, but that innovation wouldn't take off unless there was a tradition. And likewise in everything else, his language, the compounds he makes, the colloquialism he uses, and inventively, is again the bane of the translator, as they themselves all the time apologize for. And yet that was the German core. So that persuaded me to believe that unless there is the Indian core, theatre won't make sense. I had already come to be contemptuous of the imitative quality of theatres which were producing pale and paler copies of Western theatre, not only in terms of Ibsen, Shaw, Gorky, whatever they were presenting, or even Clifford Odets, Waiting for Lefty and things of that kind. But the English language in which they presented, or even in translations when they became those characters Western, and the mainstream theatre sets lighting everything. And I had something else from out of the experience in IPTA. Folk elements, Samar Sheikh, Shailendra, Annabhav Sathe, Govalkar, these were people from from the village with glorious voices and such abandon, and that had deeply impressed me. So I went right back to Chhattisgarh after returning from England to give it another look. I had corrected the folk songs of Chhattisgarh. Those songs had helped me even in days when I was almost starving because I was hitchhiking in Europe. And once in Budapest in Hungary, I had to use those songs in a nightclub to be able to earn any money at all. So those songs I had collected right from my childhood. So I went back and I had a look at the Nacha, and I felt that there is the Brechtian analytical theatre, there is the Sanskrit drama tradition which is so open and very epic and demolishes the 3 Aristotelian unities of time, space and action, which again I didn't find in any books except through experience. And this is what I noticed in the Nacha theatre of Chhattisgarh. They abolished these unities, they have this abandon, and there is the possibility of making it as a vehicle for any modern interpretation, which was limited in their case. But we could make it much more meaningful if we harnessed it to contemporary effect and messages. And that's what took me back to Chhattisgarh and stuck to it. And of course to other rural areas in Haryana, Odisha. I did workshops in other forms also, in Rajasthan.
What agenda do you have for yourself in the future?
Well, the agenda for the future, unfortunately, is getting constricted by lack of amenities, facilities for rehearsal, storage, accommodation, residence of actors. If I may be allowed to say this, I have come to a point in my life, and for whatever it is worth, the kind of work I have put in, which gets me a lot of lip service from those who can help. I'm talking about government quarters, and I'm talking about other people who can help, has yet not got me facilities enough to have a workshop situation in which I can teach the younger folk actors and also younger urban actors and pass it on in more systematically some of the experiences that I've gained, so that they can combine with it their own experience and find their own way, benefiting from all the pitfalls and ups and downs of my experience. So the future plans are limited by that. I want to gain time to write something about these experiences, and I'm looking for a place. I have given up hopes in Delhi, elsewhere. So I move out and have a place where actors can stay with me, have workshops, have rehearsals, and production can go at a slower pace, allowing me to write also at the same time. That is the future.
Well, Habib Sahib, with a prayer for your dreams to be fulfilled, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Lifetime building bridges between the urban and the rural, between the modern and the traditional, between the folk and the pseudo-folk. He has sculpted a brand of theatre uniquely his own. I'm delighted to welcome Habib Tanvir. Habib Sahib, you've recently done a play in the United States about building bridges.
Yes.
What was this play about?
Well, it turned out to be a play about the immigrant. I was asked to do workshops and at the end maybe produce a play, any at all, from Shano Casey to Gorky to Bernard Shaw or Shakespeare, anything, or just workshop. But when I was delivering lectures all over the states in many places, in
competition keeps prices down far more effectively.
As long as suffering of sentient being remain, I will remain in order to serve.
I imagined God like my grandfather.
In conversation tonight, my guest is a theatre activist who has spent a life
in a circular tour for a month, talking to Indian community and talking to taxi drivers, students, doctors, engineers, university lecturers, ordinary man in demand, in business, or people just looking for some opportunity. Every time I came across people who were stuck, and they said, we are stuck. We came for a degree, we obtained it, we happened to have got married here, or even if we brought our wives from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, we had children who were going to school, and then it's 17 years or 27 years and we are here. And they keep, occasionally when they got an opportunity to go back, but could not overcome their nostalgia. So that became my play, nostalgia and the immigrant. And the conversation with, in the workshops, I would ask them to enact their dreams or tell stories. And some very fantastic dreams came. So the subtitle of the play is Dreaming the Reality. And the whole play is full of dreams. It begins in wakeful life, ends in a scene when they wake up. But in between the whole play is one dream out there, a continuous dream.
What prompted you to sort of work in English? This is your first play, perhaps, in English.
I was doing it with for American actors in the Chicago Actors Ensemble. They were African Americans. I wanted to have the Indian Americans, the Native Americans, the Red Indians. Two of them did come, but they had some other assignments, so it was a pity. Some Indians in music and also in dance, and mostly white Americans of Polish origin, German origin, or Irish origin. All of these also had nostalgia.
Did you sort of experiment or innovate with form?
Yes, I did. I was writing in English for the first time of necessity, and also writing songs in English, and therefore had to have an American composer, actually two, but mainly Cameron. And he, because it was an Indian writer,